Who remembers the USA series Colony? I'm sure many of you do. It was basically a story about invaders from another planet come here and they build these walls, these giant metal walls, and they separate us into groups. And they use us for different experimentation and all of these kind of things that weave their way into all sorts of sci-fi nightmares. But there was an event within the series that I just had one of those moments where it's like, somebody got this right. Somebody saw this coming a long time ago. You see, these aliens did something very smart. They created a Vichy government, for lack of a better term. That was the term used back in World War II for the French collaborators that worked with the Germans. Well, they had a government of people in this series that were working on behalf of these visiting aliens. And they were in charge of keeping the peace, so to speak. And they set out all sorts of guidelines for, quote unquote, getting things back to normal. Now, what made me think of this, I want you to listen to this guy. This was the Five. And this is Jesse Waters. You see, the weather's starting to get nice up there. So they're starting to get antsy. All of a sudden, it's a giant inconvenience for them to stay inside when it's nice. And so they're finding their inner patriotic libertarian. But without any further delay, listen to what this guy says.
Well, it's like when you go underwater and you hold your breath. If you keep holding your breath, you're going to sustain brain damage or you're going to drown. And you can tell this country is ready to stop holding its breath and get above water and get a gasp of air. Because if you keep staying underwater, you've already seen depression-level economic jobs losses in just 1 month alone. This country's not going to make it to May 1st, and that's why you see some states are going to have to open in phases. From what I understand about the plan, it's a 3-phase plan. Before you even start phase 1, a state has to demonstrate a 2-week downward trajectory on cases. It has to have robust healthcare performance, and it has to have robust testing among those frontline workers. Only then can you get into phase 1. And phase 1 is just limited amounts of people going back to work. Phase 2, you open up bars, you open up restaurants, and that is only with limited capacity seating and social distancing, and they suggest non-essential travel kind of really be curtailed. Only until phase 3 do you have, schools and camps and things like that and large events, still with certain amounts of social distancing. Because right now, I don't know, man. You can feel this country getting angry. And it's not just at the Chinese. They're getting angry at the governors. They're not allowed to go to church. They don't have freedom of association. They can't pursue happiness. This is getting pretty ugly, and we can't take it anymore.
My God, my God. The arrogance, just when you think you've hit the floor of arrogance, it falls out, and then you got a whole nother deeper, darker level. Who does the federal government think they are? Now it's not only setting a date, now they get to put all of these other preconditions on it. But the reason I started with Colony, you see, they built the walls, there was this war, we got defeated, they took over, and everything was kind of like martial law, kind of like it is now, right? Well, then they started to ease up on the restrictions in exchange for certain things. For example, this guy, the main character, they have a resistance movement that they can't stop that's causing all sorts of mayhem. Well, they recruit this guy to work with them and help uncover this resistance movement started by this character named Geronimo. Well, they did the carrot and stick approach. You see, they used to have their own bar, their own corner bar that they ran, and all of this stuff, all of this non-essential business had been closed, and people were barely getting by. So this character right here, who is one of these Vichy government guys, says, you know what? All right, you work with us, you come work with the police, and you help us root out this Geronimo and his underground resistance movement, and we'll let you open up your bar and get things back to normal. And that's what they do. Unfortunately, what the guy doesn't know is that his wife is one of the leaders of the resistance movement. And she gets the oldest son involved in it, and of course that's the plot line. But it is just spooky because Colony was a long time ago. Great series, by the way. If you haven't watched it, please go watch Colony. I think this might be the first time I've actually seen Sarah Wayne, I can never pronounce her last name right, Giles, with makeup on, because she was, of course, Walking Dead, and she does all these apocalyptic thrillers where she's always just, just her, basically, living on the edge of existence. So that's why I use the picture. I'm like, I don't think I've ever seen her with makeup. So it's just weird how Hollywood has predicted this, but instead of it being some outside force, some strange alien invasion, it didn't take that. These walls were just allegory for our own fear. That we just don't do it anyway and dare them to try and stop us. That we just don't do it anyway and dare them to try and stop us. Why? Because of our social media profile. Because they know that's a weapon. Because the first guy that says, you know what, I'm going to open my bar anyway. I'm going to go do it. He would, of course, go put it on Facebook. Hey, Joe's Corner Bar is going to be open regardless. And we're going to open up. And he sends it out to all his friends, and they send it out to their friends, and then they go. And then, of course, there's a police presence that shows up. And most of those places have some type of a landlord arrangement, so the landlord could shut them down. Very few of those places actually own their own brick and mortar anymore. It's all leased. So there would be that issue. And then, of course, they would just call the power company and shut off the power to the bar so that you couldn't do it. They're flying drones, and this is kind of weird, now that I think about this. They policed the streets at night for curfew with these weird one-eyed drone things. And it's not make-up story. You can look it up. There are drones flying over, police drones, different neighborhoods and places in Florida, making sure that people aren't gathering in too large of a group in their own backyards, having their own parties. Now, there's a lot more of us doing that than they can keep track of. And there's really nothing they can do anyway. But they do use the power of social media in an attempt to shame people. Because that's the big thing now. Everybody has to feel like they are accepted. I enjoy having the 112,000 subscribers, don't get me wrong. I don't say things that I know they're going to agree with. I call it like it is. So all of a sudden, the New York narcissism starts to reveal the truth of what's really going on. Earlier in that clip, I just didn't want to go through a whole bunch of nonsense. There's a consortium of 7 Midwestern governors that are getting together to coordinate reopening. There's the West Coast Consortium. If the government comes out and says, Florida, because you don't meet this guideline or that guideline, we aren't going to allow you. Washington, D.C. is going to get a wake-up call about Florida real quick. We're going to open up anyway. Disney might not. But there's a whole bunch of places up and down the strip. They don't really need electricity. They got the beach. And they can buy ice to keep drinks cold. And if they want to come to Florida and they want to throw down over this, they can. They can levy as many fines as they want. What's the difference if you're going to go broke anyway, right? If you're going to go belly up because this particular thing wasn't met or that particular thing wasn't met, some DC random guideline. Our biggest enemy is going to be these Vichy collaborators, though. And those are the people right now who are the enemy. The apologists. The ones that are trying to be the reasonable voice of, oh, it's only going to be a little bit longer now. Just do what's best for your neighbor and all this other bullshit. Some of the arguments I'm hearing, if you go back and listen to this guy and listen to the arguments that he was making on behalf of the aliens that invaded, it literally sounds like the same thing. And honestly, I wanted to do a video on it, and I'm trying to think whether I should or not. Dana Perino has now ended up being the apologist for the reprehensible. She did it with Bush, and now she's doing it with this guy. She's the pretty little blonde voice. Right up here. Defending the indefensible. This is the problem right here, upper right. If you ever listen to this girl talk, she takes the most untenable, unbelievable policy, un-American policy, and makes it seem reasonable. And then this guy down here in the middle tries to make it seem funny. Mr. Men's Health. So I guess I'll leave it there, but this is what they're going to bribe you with. This is what they are going to bribe you with, giving up your liberty. Your desire for normalcy. We just want everything to be normal again. Things are never going to be normal after this. Like, share, subscribe.